Hi, and welcome to day 12 of Steph's Take live stream series, where I feature two books through the lens of the accountability evangelist. Today's books are Lean In by Sheryl Sandberg and The Soul of Money by Lynne. All right, we're going to start with Lean In. So first thing is, I didn't highlight this book, and I want to show you my tool that I use. It's a China marker. I used it many years ago to highlight my books, and I'm just pointing that out as a free advertisement for China markers because the books that I've highlighted, I've found it way easier to revisit. Those I haven't, it's been a little more difficult for me to find the concepts I want to focus on, especially when it's been years since I've read these books, which is the case in both of these books as well. But I did go back to Lean In and find a few things I want to highlight for you. So let's start with the premise of the book. Okay, I'm going to read the whole paragraph just to make sure you understand where Cheryl's coming from. This book makes the case for leaning in, for being ambitious in any pursuit. And while I believe that increasing the number of women in positions of power is a necessary element of true equality, I do not believe that there is one definition of success or happiness. Not all women want careers. Not all women want children. Not all women want both. I would never advocate that we should all have the same objectives. Many people are not interested in acquiring power, not because they lack ambition, but because they are living their lives as they desire. Some of the most important contributions to our world are made by caring for one person at a time. We each have to chart our own unique course and define which goals fit our lives, values, and dreams. I love that. So, that said, she does spend quite a bit of time talking about climbing the corporate ladder, and in the context of saying some women have to do that to benefit all women. And there's a quote that I want to share with you about that as well. All right. I believe that if more women lean in, we can change the power structure of our world and expand opportunities for all. More female leadership will lead to fairer treatment for all women. And that's why she is pushing for that. But again, the route you choose is totally up to you. And where this intersects with what I'm trying to teach is to go after your most ambitious goal. Whether that is to climb the ladder or do something else, lean into that. The other point that Sheryl makes, which I think is really good, is that she had learned as she was going up the ladder that nobody's talking to her about the internal obstacles. They're focusing on things about inequality and how there's all these men, white men in particular, in positions of power and all this structure that's in the way of the women who are trying to ascend the ladder. But not a lot of people did her the service of having her pay attention to the internal obstacles, which I translate as the leadership mirror. Right? What am I doing or not doing that is delaying or preventing my personal or professional success? So we need to understand how we're holding ourselves back, and in order to do that, we have to ask for feedback. And her quote about that is this: "The upside of painful knowledge is so much greater than the downside of blissful ignorance." Now, from my perspective, getting feedback, asking for feedback consistently can be a difficult thing to do. But it's so important. I mean, you can't make assumptions. And once you do it over time, it becomes more comfortable. It doesn't hurt as much. First couple times, it's like, oh, that makes you wince. But to Cheryl's point, you need to know, and you'd rather know than not know. So I want to share kind of my personal experience with leaning in just a second. But first, I want to close the Lean In book itself with another point she makes about why it's so important to lean in. The goal is to work toward a world where those social norms no longer exist. If more children see fathers at school pickups and mothers who are busy at jobs, both girls and boys will envision more options for themselves. Expectations will not be set by gender, but by personal passion, talents, and interests. Great point, Sheryl. All right. So in my case, I went for several years believing strongly that I wanted to be a CEO of a nonprofit. And so I spent the last many years actually on a path toward that, probably about 5 years. And I had a conversation as I was starting to look at leaving my last job, which was a vice president at a nonprofit. So I was on the succession plan, but I didn't really feel like I wanted to be the CEO there. Loved my boss, and in fact, he's a great leader for that organization, and I wasn't interested in succeeding him. So that made me pause. If I want to be a CEO of a nonprofit, why don't I want to be a CEO of that nonprofit? Well, it certainly wasn't the organization that was the issue. I really didn't have the answer, but I think what helped me figure it out is in my job search, I was speaking with another nonprofit CEO who I really respect, and who said to me, I think you'd be a great nonprofit CEO, which of course got me excited. But then I was like, well, then why am I not pursuing these things, or why don't they get me excited? And I think I realized something in the conversation with her. She was sharing with me why she loves to be a nonprofit CEO. Among other things, she highlighted access. So being a CEO gives you access to other things, like other boards. People want CEOs on their boards. And when you get to be on other boards or other committees, or you're asked to be part of certain initiatives, you can make a bigger impact. And that's what I realized, and actually only recently, probably as recently as going back to this book, that it's not so much the CEO role that I want, and I'm not saying I wouldn't do that, but it's really not my goal right now. What I want is that access, what I want is that impact, and I feel like I'm able to do those things from where I stand, and I don't need to be a CEO. So I may be a CEO someday, but this leaning in process and really thinking about it and listening to other people has helped me hone exactly what I want to lean into. Okay, let's move on to the soul of money, which is related, and I'll get back to that in a second. So the purpose, or one of the points she makes about money, is it's the main culprit of inequality, right? This is what makes genders unequal, races, etc. Who has the money has the power, right? So let me read this quote. Money still facilitates the sharing and exchange of goods and services, but somewhere along the way, the power we gave money outstripped its original utilitarian role. Right. So money itself is not bad, right? Actually, it served a purpose, and it continues to serve a purpose. But it is our interpretation of money, our interaction with it, where the real mischief is, and where we find the real opportunity for self-discovery and personal transformation. Which leads to why I read this book. So I was having some cognitive dissonance internally with myself, because I wanted to serve others and be humble, but I wanted to make a lot of money, and I felt bad about that. But I really did see money as the way to make an impact on other organizations, and a good friend of mine, a business partner, recommended that I read this book. The author actually had a similar struggle with fundraising. So she was not a big fan of it. She felt it was manipulative and arm-twisting, but then she realized that it gave her an opportunity to, quote, create an opportunity for people to engage in their greatness, which I love it. So that makes me feel differently about fundraising as well. So a couple key concepts from her book are scarcity and sufficiency. So she says scarcity is a lie, okay, just frankly. Let me explain what she means by that. Once we define our world as deficient, the total of our life, energy, everything we think, everything we say, and everything we do, particularly with money, becomes an expression of an effort to overcome this sense of lack and the fear of losing to others and being left out. So when you constantly feel like there's not enough, you're constantly going after more, right? But when you realize that there already is enough, you behave differently, which brings us to sufficiency. So sufficiency isn't an amount at all. It is an experience, a context we generate, a declaration, a knowing that there is enough and that we are enough. Sufficiency resides inside of each of us, and we can call it forward. It is a consciousness, an attention, an intentional choosing of the way we think about our circumstances. In our relationship with money, it is using money in a way that expresses our integrity, using it in a way that expresses value rather than determines value. I'm going to say that again. expresses value rather than determines value. So that helped me change the way I look at money. So my husband and I were very anxious about our bills and everything. I mean, certainly we have enough to put food on the table and then some. A lot of people have way, way, way less than us, so we are not complaining or asking for any charity by any means. But that didn't mean we weren't stressed out about it. And so when I looked at our budget, I realized there's a lot of things that I would call non-discretionary fixed expenses. So things like dance, karate for the kids, private school tuition. These are things that we express value using our money, right? We believe these are really important for the children. And when we started to think about it as opposed to an expense that is kind of holding us back, as the way that we are expressing value for our lives, we thought differently, right? And so I highly recommend you revisit the things that you are buying, spending money on, if it's stressing you out the way it was stressing me out, to think of it in terms of, what worth does this have? Is this a good place for my money? And in that case, we decided it was. Now, going beyond that, my desire is to give to organizations who support people who have the most need. So what I realized, and also in conversation with nonprofit CEOs, I've asked them directly, what do you need? And their answer almost always is, we need money. And not just any money, unrestricted donations. For those of you not in the development fundraising space, that means you write a check to the organization and they determine how they use it. As opposed to you saying, here's my money, but you have to use it in this way. All right? Sometimes we're tempted to do that because maybe we don't trust that the organization is going to do the right thing with it, or we want to know for sure the specific impact we're going to have. But what I do is choose organizations that I believe make good decisions about that, right? They analyze and determine where is the biggest impact, where can my money go in the best way. And so I write them a check and let them decide. So my decision actually has to do with the organization that I choose. So my ambitious goal is to use my talents to make a lot of money so I can write big checks to these organizations to further their good work. I want to make money to give it away because, quote from the book, I value making a difference over making a fortune. And further, I don't just want to give money. I want to make a commitment. So it's not just a check transaction. This is a commitment. And so the final concept I want to share with you is what Lynne talks about here, and it's solidarity. While charity may help those on trial by the system, solidarity may put the system itself on trial. It not only gives resources, but it actively works to change the very systems that unfairly put resources into the hands of some at the expense of others. And later in the book she says, we have an opportunity now to retire traditional charity as we've known it, and in its place create partnerships in which a shared vision is realized through solidarity and the collaboration of know-how, sweat equity, and cash resources. So for me, that's how I lean in. All right, that's it for now. I'll see you next time.